Johan, how's it going? You said you want to talk about we have a moral imperative to believe that which supports well-being. Sounds like one of my friends
Yes,
that I talk
thank
to
you
about morality all the time.
Thank you. Yes, thank you so much for talking with me today. I just want to say before I go on, it's the last call is a difficult act to follow because it was so horrifying that it makes my call seem trivial by comparison. But I'll go forward. I want to start with the. I'll just give a tiny bit of background. I called the show about a year ago, and I had a very long, interesting conversation with Shannon and Johnny Angel. And I listened back to the call later and realized that I hadn't made the point that I called to make. So I want to start with that, and then if you want to pursue it or get any background, we can go from there. So the point was that I want to make was that a secular morality, I don't know where you stand on this, but it's been put forward that a secular morality could be based generally on the concept of well-being. And if I live on a desert island and have no interaction with other human beings, then obviously my well-being is geared around my survival, and I have no obligation to other humans. But if I live in society, then I have an obligation to other human beings, and the concept of well-being becomes more generalized to what is conducive to the well-being of the group or the tribe or the nation or the world. So if I start from there, then my point is that then based on that concept of well-being and building a morality from that foundation, I have a moral imperative to believe that which supports well-being.
Okay. All right. How would you define that specifically then? That's kind of a overarching theme. Make it specific for us.
Yeah, because what well-being kind of bakes in right? It already bakes in this normative notion of good. And so that's why it's hard for me to parse out, because I'm like, I think I know what you mean, but it seems to kind of just bake in. It's like the word, murder. It's already baked in that it's a wrong thing, right? So it just seems like we're sneaking something in.
Yeah. The thing I'm trying to get to is that in a society, let's say where I live in a community, and the community has children, it seems inarguable to me that the well-being of that community depends on supporting those children, making sure they have food, clothing, shelter, education, so that they can grow into adulthood, and that it would be morally wrong to deprive them of those things, to abuse them, or to neglect them. And so therefore, I have a moral imperative to believe that the care of children is an important value.
That's the key. So if you're saying it's an imperative, are you saying it's like a categorical imperative? Because this is going to be I will agree with you. I agree with that imperative, but I agree with it under the idea that I buy in, right? So I buy in, I have values. I have things that I buy into, or that can be presented to me that can change my opinion. Go, I agree and I buy into that. But that's going to be a hypothetical imperative, right? It's going to be like, if, I care about well-being, then I should do these things to maximize well-being. And I perfectly agree with you there. Yeah. But if you're making a different claim, right, we drop the if statement. It's just, you ought care about this thing independent of how you feel. I don't really even know what that means, because I don't know what a reason is for me to act independent of like my own values, right? That doesn't seem to be coherent to me. It seems that this is like morality is clearly a subjective thing that just comes from values and desires that happen to overlap with other people because we have similar phenomenal experiences and similar physical experiences. But I don't know how that means there's like an imperative out there floating in the world, right? That's where I get confused. I don't understand that.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think that is a relative imperative.
Okay.
So I would just, I take it to, I've identified and we can discuss this if you like, but 3 different types of propositions that I can either assent to belief or disbelief. The first type is that which has already been demonstrated in one way or another. For an example of that one is the Earth is roughly 150 million kilometers from the sun. I haven't personally demonstrated that fact, but I assent to the belief that that is true because it's been demonstrated. The second type of proposition is one that might someday be verified or demonstrated, but hasn't yet been. An example of that type is there exists intelligent life on other planets. Possibly yes, possibly no. It could be demonstrated. All that would be required would be for intelligent life from another planet to arrive on Earth and announce itself. And then the third type of proposition is that which cannot be demonstrated. And my view is that the existence of God is of the third type that cannot be demonstrated. And in that case, my view is that we have a moral imperative to believe that which supports well-being. Then we
on the third one, though, you're a theist, though, right? Because I'm confused. If you can't demonstrate it, then you just presumably are saying that I don't have a justification. Nonetheless, I accept the proposition to be true, which just seems arbitrary, right? Like, I don't arbitrarily accept proposition. I don't like Dave doesn't just go, hey, what do you think about this proposition? It's raining outside in Florida or something. And I go, yeah, I accept that. Right. Like, I wouldn't, you would want to like maybe look up the weather, or, maybe you trust somebody like a meteorologist.
And I guess I don't understand how your acceptance of this third proposition connects to this moral imperative to believe that which supports well-being. Connect those dots for me.
Yeah. So, full disclosure, just so you know where I'm coming from, I'm a Spinozan pantheist, so not a Christian, not a believer in any religion, but a Spinozan pantheist. And so in some ways indistinguishable from an atheist, except where consciousness is concerned. But be that as it may, where well-being comes into this assent to a belief on the third type of proposition is, if no answer can be found, the skeptic would say, well, just withhold your belief because no answer can be found. But my position is different. My position is, where no answer can be found, adopt the belief that is most conducive to well-being, to the group, to the community, to the nation, to the world. And whether or not belief in God is conducive to well-being or not is an entirely separate question that could be argued until the cows come home. But I just want to stop with the viewpoint that one ought to believe that which supports well-being. And if belief in God supports well-being, yes, then believe in God. With or without.
Let's start from that first part. So let's start from that first part. One ought to believe in well-being. And Dave, I don't want to take up all this time. If you want to go ahead, I just don't. I'm like perfectly okay with sweet. Like maybe we accept what well-being is, and we all ought do that. But I'm not just going to, because I agree with that stance, or like I think that that's how I value my morals, that therefore like I'm going to project that onto the world as if that's like the objective way people ought live. I need some type of argument for that, or some type of like evidence for that, right? And Dave, I don't know what you.
Yeah, and there needs to be. To me, it's still too much of a generic, overarching idea to say that a belief in God. If we could accept that proposition, to say that a belief in this particular God, first of all, you have to define which one you're talking about, because they're all different and they all compete with one another to exclusivity. But if you're going to say to a belief in God A is going to support well-being, that's too vague for me, because you've got to define what this God's actions are, what this God's standards are, what this God's moralities are. And until you can define that in specific ways, you can't buy into this notion of belief in this God is going to support well-being. Well-being for who?
Yeah, Dave's actually got a great point. It might not even be propositional, right? We might parse it out. It might just end up being like green TV, just like a phrase that isn't propositional at all. So like it's hard for us to accept that when it's like we don't even know what the words in the proposition refer to in the world, right?
Does that make
Yes,
sense?
my
Johan?
own view is that, yeah, it does. My own view is that well-being is supported by the broadest possible diversity of beliefs. So I don't suggest that everyone ought to believe in God A because that's conducive to well-being. I think what's conducive to well-being is that the materialists are atheists, and the Christians are Christians, and the Muslims are Muslims, and the pantheists are pantheists. I think the broadest possible diversity of belief is what supports well-being, not that we ought to try and convince each other that the other is wrong.
No, I mean, and I think I agree with you that we should care about. I'm with Dave. I'm trying to grant more because I think this notion of well-being is very vague. It just kind of sneaks in.
It's too vague. Yeah,
sneaks in the values, right? If I say this is well-being, well is already a normative notion that like denotes it being good, and we're trying to figure out what it is that's actually good that we ought all have in your terms, right? Have an imperative to believe. And I don't see that that's the case because the analysis, and we're gonna have to move on after this, but the analysis for someone who's taking on moral realism, at least in the typical way that it's been expressed in the literature, is there's reasons independent of your values, independent of your stances on why you should do X. And I think that view is scary for like two reasons. One, well, it's not for one, it's not really scary. It's just I don't even know what that means. Like it's like saying there's an objective tasty food that's divorced from taste buds. What? No, taste is.
You've got to define it. The definitions are too vague here to even grapple with the argument itself. The idea that first of all, my view is that the world would be better without any religion because these religions muddy the water and do damage to one another and to humanity by and large. So trying to get behind a particular belief in a God or a religion surrounding that God and saying that this is going to support well-being if we just let everybody believe in their own God and quit trying to convince each other. Well, that's not going to happen because the belief systems themselves are exclusionary of one another. They're not allowing each other to get along well together. These they don't play well together. They never have. And so saying that mankind is going to suddenly accept a bunch of religions that differ with each other and we're all going to get along and say, you believe yours and I believe mine and we'll go happily. Well, it's not going that direction in case you haven't noticed. So I'm not sure that that's even something that we can even talk about because the ideas are just too vague right now with this conversation.
Well, it's something that I can do as an individual. I don't need to try to convert anyone to anything.
Oh, individuals, yeah, I'm the same, but looking at society, that's not what we're seeing. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes, I absolutely agree.
Okay.
And to supply the definitions completely that you're asking for would require at least an entire book to be written. So it's not something we can do on this call. But
I grant that you're not going to be able to give like an entire meta-ethical view on the phone or on the call-in show. But when I have one of my best friends, who I love to talk to about this, and we've stayed up, the other night just talking about this. When I do this analysis for like a long time with people, I just like don't think that they're expressing anything different than my view. They're just calling it realism, or they're calling like well-being like this thing that everybody should care about. But I'm not seeing like how they even establish that in the first place. And then if we tie it to like pantheism or things like that, it starts to get really vague to me, and I don't really even know what's being expressed. So I don't even I can't even say I deny the proposition. I'm like, I don't even know what the proposition is. It's just like saying green TV or something. It's like, maybe I kind of get what you mean, but like, not really. Like, I don't know. Sorry, but no, please call back. And maybe we can continue.
Thanks for the call.
Unravel this.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You bet.
Thank you. All right. Do you have any? Well, before we go back to calls.
Yeah.
How are you feeling about how's your well-being? Is it feeling good? Is your subjectively good? Like, because we got heated so far.
Well, yeah. Well, you mean me as a person in my life right now?
Well, I mean, from the call previous to this, which was a little different, has your well-being been restored a little bit?
I've done this so much and I've talked to these people so long, and I know where he's coming from. I know how horrible those ideas are, and yet when someone defends the indefensible at the expense of unfortunate suffering, I get pissed off because that's not okay.